Welcome to the ConfigureITDone Podcast. The ConfigureITDone Podcast is a place where successful thought leaders in the SAP space come to share their leadership styles, their tips, and their unique stories on how to run successful large-scale SAP programs. Listen to the podcast to learn from their successes, their failures, their career stories, and their inspirations.
This podcast is in partnership with the Black Dog Institute, who aim to create a mentally healthier world for everyone. If you wish to support the cause, please donate via the link below.
So welcome everybody. Today I am here with Wayne Roach, who I've actually known for, nearly 10 years now. I met you back in your Westfield days, didn't I?
You did.
Yeah. We're showing our age, that's for sure. Maybe not me, but...
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So I've known Wayne for 10 years. He's currently at Department of Justice, but before that he was the release manager for the Endeavour Energy Programme. And if you watch the Neil Minto podcast, you will see that Neil actually requested that I approach Roach. So here we go. Now, let's get into it. So we're going to start off with some quick fire questions, just to kind of get to know you a little bit more. And then we're going to get into a little bit about you and your story within SAP, what keeps you in SAP, and then just some reflection time. So let's get into these 20 quick fire questions. What is your full name?
Wayne Roy Roach.
Wayne Roy Roach. Lovely. And then what's your nickname?
Oh, Roach He, of course. One person that I grew up with used to call me Wazza, but he died last year, so I won't hear that again. So he's the only one that ever called me that.
Yeah. Well.
Other than again, he was 6'7", so I couldn't say, "Hey, stop it."
Yeah, you'd be in trouble, definitely. And where are you from?
Sydney.
Sydney born and bred.
In North Sydney, Marta Hospital.
Oh, really? There you go. And then you're sort of northwestish Sydney now, I suppose, aren't you? So.
I am indeed. Yeah.
So I'm going to cut out the next question then of how long have you been in Australia? Because that'll give away your age, won't it?
Yeah, I'm not saying that.
No, there we go. Okay. I said it earlier, but where are you currently working?
Communities and Justice, the PATH program.
Yeah. What's your role there?
Deployment manager for Deployment Team 1, which is Department DPE, Regional New South Wales, and Office of Sport.
Oh, so what's the best job you've ever had?
Probably being a project manager in SAP. I've thoroughly enjoyed it over the past 25 years. So.
Any role in particular that stands out?
Thoroughly enjoyed Cutter Holt Harvey. We worked our bums off, but it was so successful. We were in Auckland for 4 months, and it was so successful. The project sponsor, 2 days after we went live, said, "You guys are wasting your time. Go home." So there was absolutely nothing to do. We planned to be there for 2 weeks to, address any issues or concerns. None. So It was quite amazing.
It's virtually unheard of, isn't it?
Well, it's the most successful project I think I've ever been on. Unreal.
Yeah, awesome. What do you think made it successful?
The team were really committed. It was a big team. We had like 75 people in the implementation team. That included business people, but they were all committed. Our implementation manager basically said he pulled more all-nighters on this program than he did on doing his MBA. So,
wow, that's some dedication, right?
Yep.
Just shows you it's always the people, isn't it? So I'm sure we'll get into that a bit further along. And so what's the worst job you've ever had?
I had to think about this last night. There's no real worst job. The worst project I've been involved in, which was still successful, by the way, was a SAP implementation in 14 weeks due to a court order during a hostile takeover.
That sounds like fun.
Fabulous. It was fabulous. Second day in, I got accused of industrial espionage by the CIO. So it was fun, real fun.
Yeah, great. I hope they paid you a lot for that one.
They did.
Good. Okay. Favorite sport?
Motor racing.
Motor racing. Interesting. Okay. And favorite beer to go with the motor racing?
I don't generally drink a lot of beer, but if I had to pick one, it would be Maltese Black.
Maltese Black. Well, what do you drink? Wine, whiskey?
Generally wine, generally Sauvignon Blanc, and generally Marlborough region from New Zealand.
Very specific. I mean,
Mhm.
yeah, I agree with you. Got to share a bottle of that one day soon, Wayne.
Definitely.
Favorite meal?
Yeah, generally anything Italian.
Yeah, nice.
I'm a fan of Italian food, for sure.
Same. It's my favorite as well. Give me all the pasta, please.
True.
Oh, sorry, I should say it in my Australian made pasta. There we go. So here's a good question. How do you keep yourself sane?
Generally by reading.
Yeah.
One of my lockdown tip was take some time out for yourself, do some exercise. But I generally make sure I set some time aside every morning when I get up with a cup of coffee and read my book for half an hour before I start work. Or actually,
Right.
just after I start work, because I start, do my emails, catch up on everything, and then I go and read for half an hour.
Yeah.
Make sure I haven't
Nice.
missed anything overnight.
Do you like fiction or sort of autobiographies? Or I know you've got a thirst to learn, haven't you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, fiction definitely. Generally, Clive Cussler, Matthew Riley, Lee Child. And if I want a bit of comic relief, it's Janet Ivanovic.
Good. All right. I will write those down and read some myself. Listen to some, read some. Although, as a working mum, I can't remember the last time I read a book, so I've got to do it. If you could describe your management style in one word, what would it be?
That's a difficult question because these days collaborative.
Yeah.
You have to bear in mind that a lot of the jobs I've had over the years, I've been the guy they drop in to fix problems. So
Okay.
in which case it's never collaborative, it's dictatorial.
Yeah.
So if you're dropped into, rescue a troubled project, collaborative is not really the right way to approach it. You have to actually just take control.
And do you think that's why you and Neil worked so well together then? Because you were in there to fix programs?
Definitely. We understood from the start that it wasn't a particularly well perceived project in the marketplace, but we actually took the approach that we were going to deliver it no matter what, and we did. So.
Good. Well done. Favorite music?
Oh, man. No, I'm a fan of music, and that's where things fall apart because everything from heavy rock, Black Sabbath, through to Eminem, through to Michael Bublé, don't care. Listen to everything.
Anything and everything, right?
Yeah, pretty
You've
much.
got a very eclectic Spotify playlist.
I've got a hard drive with 2,600 albums on it.
Gosh, you don't even need to go for Spotify.
Yep.
You can do your own version of it, the Roachify.
Yeah, pretty much.
What's your favourite film, Wayne?
Man, I thought about this last night. Anyone that knows me is I'm a fan of theatre. So therefore, there's no such thing as a favourite film for me. I love the Fast and Furious series.
Oh, yeah.
I also like the Avengers series. I've watched
Big Marvel
all
fan.
of those. If you want a motivational movie, watch Remember the Titans.
I've never seen it.
Right. Denzel
Okay.
Washington, based on a true story. Fabulous film.
All right, I'll watch that tonight whilst eating pasta and drinking Sauvignon Blanc.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah. Okay. And what's your favourite holiday destination?
If I can't get out of Australia, it's Port Douglas. If I can get out of Australia, it's Italy.
Yeah, that's because you've got all the good food, right?
Mm-hmm.
Although
Correct.
it's bad that you have to say if I can't get out of Australia. Sign of the times, right?
Last 2.5 years, we couldn't get out of Australia. So
This is
yeah,
true.
definitely.
Couldn't even get into
Couldn't
Queensland,
get
I
out of New
remember.
South Wales.
Yeah, or your local LGA.
Yeah.
So what's your bucket list thing to do?
Ride a motorbike around Australia.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I have my license as well.
Oh,
We're
I've
gonna
had
have to
my
do
license
it.
for
Drink
a long
Sauvignon Blanc
time.
and eat loads of pasta. So
Yeah, I've had my license a long time.
yeah, I bet. What's your favourite city?
Sydney. But if I'm outside of Australia, then it's Venice.
Venice. Yeah, Venice is glorious, isn't it?
It is.
And if you weren't in SAP, what would you do?
Probably something motor related. I am an engineer by profession, so I'm a mechanical engineer, so anything engineering is right up my alley.
Yeah, sure. And then give us a fun fact about yourself, Wayne.
If I go back to, I thought about this last night, and there's a couple I can't mention. I got my motorcycle license at 17,
Yeah.
but when I got my learner's permit, I'd never ridden a motorcycle before. I rocked up to the RTA, got my learner's permit, jumped in a cab, went across to the bike shop to pick up the bike that I'd purchased the week before. I asked the guy if he'd ride around the corner for me because it was on the main road. And he said, yeah, no problem. You know, new bike, not used to it, fair enough. What he didn't know is I'd never ridden a bike before. So I jumped on it, rode it around the back streets of Burwood for half an hour, then rode it home.
Crazy.
So, yeah, pretty much.
That's crazy. But you know, that's the way you learn with the motorbikes, isn't it? I did exactly the same. I did my learner's license out at Clyde, so not that far from Burwood as well, and went out there on with my L's, never ridden a bike before, and then did the actual course because you have to do the course nowadays, don't you? And yeah, never ridden a bike. So again, I learned to ride on the back streets of Clyde. So very similar. Although I've had an accident now, so I wouldn't go back on a bike. So that's maybe where the difference lies.
Yeah, I've only fallen off once. So.
Yeah, and you got straight back on?
Yeah, rode it home.
Yeah, no, I sold mine. I got someone else to ride it home and then I sold it. Very scary. I was in crutches for 6 weeks, so you know, I was allowed. Okay, so let's get into the nitty gritty now, the fun bit. Now we know a little bit more about you. So obviously, as I said earlier, I've known you for sort of coming up to 10 years now, and at that time you were at Westfield on a SharePoint project, I think. So how did you get into SAP? What's your story?
Sadly enough, 1994, I was working for Ampol Australia. I was in the marketing accounting group. I'd written the profit reporting system to be used Australia-wide. The CEO decided that he wanted to explore SAP and run a pilot. So he asked me to be involved as a business analyst on the finance side for the pilot. So I did that. The interesting part was the pilot was canned because they decided to merge Caltex and Ampol together, which we did over a period of time. When we finished that, the boss then went, okay, SAP's back on the table. Cool, what's the new date? Same date. So we actually had to deliver the project at the same timeline that he set, having started 3 months later.
Oh my gosh.
So it was intense. But yeah, that was the first implementation in 1995 with Hewlett Packard, SAP, and Anderson's Consulting. But from there, I've spent over 25 years on and off in SAP.
And so that's a pretty good tenure. What keeps you in SAP?
Because they keep changing it. It keeps developing, it keeps changing. A mate and I, who's been in SAP as well, a little bit longer than me actually, basically said we got together and we went, SAP, it's new on the block. Probably be around about 6 or 7 years, and then something new will come along, and then we'll have to learn something new. Well, that's it. You know, we'd have to learn something new. But I think the stats now are 40% of businesses worldwide use SAP, so there's a reasonably good reason to stay in the business, and it just keeps changing. We went all the way through to ECC6, then we've gone into S4HANA. So, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that seems to be what a lot of people say. It's forever changing and growing and adapting and becoming more interesting. So it keeps you in there, right? So, yeah.
Yes.
So, what's your definition of a successful SAP program? And then the second layer to that question is, how do you think it's changed over time?
It actually hasn't changed over time.
No?
No, a successful program is one that is technically live, but users use it. One of my standard statements is, it doesn't matter how successful technically you are, if nobody uses your software, it's a failure. So that's why I always state that change management training are always an important part of the program, because it's the adoption of the program by the business users that makes it successful.
Yeah, that's true. You'd be surprised by the amount of clients that we speak to that they've implemented it, and then a few years later we speak to them again and nobody's using it, so they've got to change it or bring it up to speed. So which blows my mind.
Well, SAP didn't help themselves in the early days either, because if you look at their ASAP methodology in the early days, they did systems integration testing, but their methodology didn't include user acceptance testing. So they basically said, test it technically. If it works, give it to the users and let them use it. So the users weren't part of the process in the early days.
Yeah, I suppose if you're thinking of the technical side, you don't think of the users, right? So yeah,
But they're the ones that actually make your project successful. So
true. Very, very true. So what are the top 3 imperatives that you look for within your team when delivering programs?
Passion, commitment, and balance. They've got to be passionate about the delivery. They need to be involved and make sure that they're committed to the delivery. It's not just a day-to-day job. I mean, that's for BAU people. There are particular type of people that like that sort of role. Project people are completely different. They want to see something delivered, they want to see it successful, and they want to walk away and start something new. So they've got to be that passionate about the delivery. The commitment, because any project work takes a hell of a lot of time. And, you start off working your normal 8-hour days. When you get to a cutover, you're likely working 16-hour days up to the transactional data loads, and then you're working 24/7 in large operations. So it takes a fairly committed people to step up to that and go, yeah, I'm going to do this. And then balance is there is work, but there is also life. You have to balance the two. So
Can you do that? Then you're committed to cut over, though.
we gave it a damn good shot.
By eating pasta and drinking Sauvignon Blanc.
Well, there was a lot of red wine after hours, I can assure you.
Nice.
And a lot of deliveries. The Carter Harvey one that I mentioned earlier was quite amazing, because that was 14 years ago. And we're talking about a program. We went to a local restaurant, got them to actually make up meals for us, freeze them and deliver them. So all of the team had a fabulous meal any time of the day they wanted it.
Yeah.
We had fresh fruit delivered. We had nuts delivered, to the point where my basis team rebelled, I think on the Sunday night at 2:00 in the morning, and did a Macca's run because they were sick of eating healthy food.
Yeah, I'd be
Only,
to be fair.
only go live
Before
I've ever
Uber
been.
Eats.
Yeah, well, that's way before it, but the only go live I've ever been involved in where I lost weight. So,
Wow, really?
very
Too
stressed.
healthy. You've got to go for the Maccas.
Hmm.
So what is your project management methodology, and how do you define it?
Well, mine's a mixture, because it's generally waterfall, but I've used ASAP, I've used Method 1, I've used Method Blue, I've used all of the methodologies that come across. And the reality is, it doesn't matter what you use. When you get under the covers, all the deliverables or the accelerators are the same. They just name them differently. I mean, organizations tend to create their own methodology to try and establish a bit of a leverage in the market. they're the same. So if you understand what you've got to deliver over a period of time, it doesn't matter what methodology you're using. You can use the same sort of approach. You still get it delivered on time.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, isn't it? It's basically all the same, but wrapped up and packaged in a different way. You've all got the same, got the same mission and the same challenge. It's just got a fancier name.
Yep, correct.
Yeah. What would you describe then? And we've had some very interesting answers to this question, so I'm keen to see what you say. What would you describe as your biggest failure?
Yeah, okay. A life lesson. As I said, I'm an engineer by profession. Being a young engineer, I joined Gilbarco as a design engineer. I was basically designing petrol pumps for the market, or fuel management systems as well. I got asked to actually redesign and install their production line test equipment. I did that, had it installed, had it commissioned, wrote all the manuals, had them all bound and all nicely done, all the labeling on the machine done, rocked down to the production line, handed it over to the guy and said, this is it, His response was, "I cannot read." And a junior idiot engineer basically went, I knew he was Greek, and I assumed that he couldn't read English. So I had the manuals converted to Greek. I had the traffic light labels recut in both languages, English and Greek. And I came back and he said, "I cannot read." He was illiterate.
Right.
So I felt about this tall. So
yeah.
that's the life lesson. Never assume.
Never assume.
Yeah.
It's a very good point. You were trying to do the right thing there, right? But
I
you
was,
were wrong.
but being a young stupid engineer who didn't look at the facts, I got it horribly wrong. So,
naive but passionate. Let's call it that.
yeah, I
Yeah.
haven't made that mistake again.
No. And I suppose that ties in really nicely to project management as well, right? Never ever assume that it's going to be successful, or never assume that what works for you works for someone else.
Yeah,
There you
correct.
go. Who's been your biggest influence in your career?
Gentleman by the name of John Astle. Back in the late 80s, I was a programmer, but I was a very good programmer. I could make things work without any trouble, but creating the right structured code, I wasn't very good at. So John sat me down and took me through basically how to not write spaghetti code, how to have it structured properly, how you could actually manage it properly. And that was probably the best lesson I've ever learned. So,
Where did you learn to code? On the job, or did you go to
taught myself.
school? You taught yourself. Okay, so it was probably good to have someone who could come in and show
Yeah.
you the professional ways of doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Now think back. What would you tell your 21-year-old self?
Just keep doing what you're doing. Yeah.
Never assume.
No. Well, at 21, I was working at Qantas as a aircraft engineer. So I was nowhere near IT at all. So yeah.
You? Really interesting. I love to hear people
Oh
cover
yeah.
people's careers and like where they've gone and what they've done. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so final question, and bear in mind this is how we got you on the podcast, Approach Roach. Who would you like to see on the podcast?
Yeah, I thought about that. There's actually three people that I think would make a good contribution. One of them being Neil McClure, who you've spoken to previously. He's now a global CIO. Brian Pereira.
Oh yeah.
who is, you know, a high-end sort of management guy these days, but has created a couple of startups. He was vice president for HCL for Asia Pacific. He was my boss at IBM.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is Chris Perello, if you really want to laugh.
I do.
Chris, I've employed Chris twice over the years. He's employed me 3 times. So we go back a ways. He's been in the Army Reserve. He's been a New South Wales policeman. He's been a CIO in quite a few organisations. One of them being EMI Records. He needs to tell you that story. So yeah, great character.
Okay.
He's the guy you employ on a project if you need some comic relief. Brings a
Alrighty.
guitar with him.
Is that a good thing? I'm not sure.
Fabulous, because you know, he's singing all the time. He's got a guitar with him all the time, but he's an incredibly professional individual, but likes to have some fun as well.
Well, for a muso like you, you'd definitely be a fan of that then. Yeah, there you go. Okay, well, I will approach these guys. Thank you very much. And thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, not really. I think we've covered off just about everything. There's, you know, 25 years of SAP is a lot to cover in 30 minutes. But, you know, anyone that's interested in being in SAP and being engaged in SAP, it's quite a wild ride. You have some good fun and you have some really annoying times as well.
Yeah.
You know,
That's life though, right?
big time, big time. And IT is like that. It's, as you say, it's so changeable. And that's the reason a lot of us stay in it, because it's constantly changing. There's new innovations, there's new technology, there's, you know, things that, you know, all of these mobile platforms that we're now, you know, using and utilizing in high-end ERP software is brilliant. It's just fabulous. So that's what you got to look forward to. And, you know, some of the
Exciting, isn't it?
technology things, if you talk to Brian and Neil, you know, some of the high-end technology that they're utilizing is just unreal. So
Yeah, blows your mind a bit, right?
big time, big time.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, thank you very much, Wayne. It's been a pleasure.